generation have the great divide. To us is, where is the solution? How can we make it better? To the people over there is, kill the Castros and then we'll fix it.
Right.
Which is another fallacia. It's a fallacy. It's a fallacy because the one thing is that Fidel Castro and his people are exactly the same as the people here in Miami. It was the characteristic of an age. It's the 40s and the 50s in Cuba. It gave people like Fidel, people like Mascanosa, who died here in exile. They are all the same. I have no doubt that Fidel might have done a better job than whatever any of these guys was capable of. In the first place, because he was more knowledgeable, he was more educated than many of these guys who never made it past elementary school, and then they come to Miami and they become great politicians. But they really are, what they are is opportunistic people. They are the sharks who want to go back to Cuba and really own the country and do probably worse than Fidel.
Wow.
As for my generation, we are people who are thinking more of the concept of the country land is old and antiquated. The concept of, those things, we don't have to live by those things. We have to think about the people, and we have to think about how to make it better for them. Whether it's in Cuba, Nicaragua, or it's in Angola or Mozambique. It's all about getting direct to the people and trying to make things to change.
And
we stay too long trapped in the political scene of today's world. Oh my God, man.
And so that explains why the people who came in the 60s do not want to allow any tourism by gringos.
Exactly, and they will do everything possible for it not to happen.
And that's why your group basically says, sure, let's let them in. Let's build some industry for the people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let's
I talked to one of the most decent ones, Oscar Don, one of the decent ones. You know what he told me? He was one of the big shots from the 59 movement that came to Miami doing the Peter Pan and the Camarillo things. And he said, Mario, you know what the problem is? Fidel, he beat us. He beat us. He took us out of the country. He took everything that we had. He took the whole country. He did it his way. We will never forgive him for that. So, in a sense, they simply are the losers of the whole thing. And they will always be remorseful for that.
And so to go back now as a visitor, or even to allow people to go back, would be to say, well, you won, Fidel. That's in their mind.
Yeah, I mean, people from my generation easily go back. People from those generations, they don't go back. For them, it's like coming back to the place where they were actually kicked out.
Yeah.
And I understand their pain, don't get me wrong. I don't want to create a chiasm here for, no, whatever reasons that they had or whatever happened, I do not approve of the way in which the revolution happened. But revolutions are revolutions. They always happen one way or another. You always have casualties. You always have people that are, that will lose everything they have. The question in that regard would be, how did they get what they got? Because the United Fruit Company was in Cuba for 58 years and never paid a dime of taxes to the Cuban government.
Wow.
And so did many of the great American companies in Cuba. They just didn't pay anything for being there. They were making all the profit without putting a dime into Cuba's economy. On the contrary, they had Cuba also as a marketplace in which they would take their cars and everything, and they would take everything that they already had manufactured and paid salaries for in America for the Cubans to buy it. But they never allowed the Cuban people to take part in that also growing industry of the assembly line. They never did that. They remained Cuba a mono-agricultural country, only producing sugar cane, sugar, and never worried for developing the country at all. So in a sense, Spain was more glorious in their presence in Cuba than the United States was.
Oh, in the first 50 years of...
Yeah.
20th century.
Yeah, because Spain tried to found a country, tried to create a civic society, everything, while Americans only went to Cuba to get rich.
Well, nobody comes away from your analysis untouched.
Nobody does.
Everyone has some blood.
It's the way that history has been written.
Yeah. And
when we became powerful in the 80s and we had the full support of Russia, we then took an army into Angola, one into Namibia. And we did not mind our own business. We wanted to do exactly what we always criticized America for doing. We wanted to get into other countries' internal affairs. We also wanted to change things, you know. Fidel also had the dream of changing the world. And trying to do so, there was a lot of blood spilled, and a lot of Cuban blood. Because while the Russians were putting the money, we were putting the lives down on the field.
wow.
So that's the history. It's not history of either the United States or Spain. It is the history of the world. It's what we are.
And I think what you're saying is that there's an opportunity for our generation. We can just sit and let this be North Korea to us and do nothing and say that we have nothing we can do about this. Or we can think of and be creative in 5 different ways. We can send materials. We have an old computer. Let's send it down there. It still works.
And it's the only way that we're ever going to be able to erase, you know, the problems of the war and all the political isms and all the division and divide. It's just like, if we simply do not attain to those things, it one day will be over and the world will be really as one.
And I feel very bad. I feel so bad for the people who are currently in prison, for the people who were killed by Che Guevara and by the revolution.
Absolutely.
I feel very bad.
You were present right in the place where they were shut down.
Right there in that fortress.
Yes, I also feel very bad that I was handcuffed and taken out of the university and taken into a prison cell. I had my father not had the high connections he had. You never know what would have happened to me. But I never talk about that. Because if I remain there, I will be servicing the same system that put me there. I have to get out of that, you know.
You're creating a new mentality for yourself.
I need to have a new mentality or I will never get away from the dilemma of the Cuban-American relationship and the Cuban-American war and the Cuban-American thing and the communism. No, I just have to get away from those. I just have to look ahead.
And so I think that I hope that people who read the book that you're going to be putting together will see this is how U.S. people who've been to the island perhaps mistake what's going on there.
Yes, and by doing so, they don't help enough.
If you talk about how desperate life is down there, you're not seeing the beauty. I mean, walking around with
and you know, people to people, when you touch one of the Cuban lives, you have to understand that is just a man like you are, regardless of the ideology. The biology is just the same. That man could be you in another life, or could be you in another set of circumstances.